Welcome back to the deep dive. And I have to be honest with you, right out of the gate, when I first saw the research for today's deep dive, I thought our scheduling team had maybe lost their
Oh,
minds.
yeah. Why is that?
Well, just look at the topic. We're analyzing a broadcast segment from a local TV station in Japan about the structural mechanism of their consumption
I
tax.
see your point.
On the surface, that sounds like the driest, most mundane topic you could possibly imagine. It sounds like something you'd put on TV to help a baby fall asleep.
It really does. If you saw that in a TV guide, your eyes would just glaze over instantly. You'd scroll right past it for, I don't know, a cooking show, a baseball game, literally anything else.
Exactly. And this is why we're here, the sources we're covering treat this one broadcast like it was a seismic event. They don't treat it like news. They treat it like a glitch in the matrix. They even gave it a code name, MGF-37.
Right. And I think we need to be very, very clear with everyone listening right up front. We are not here to teach you about Japanese tax law.
Thank God for that.
And we aren't here to debate if the tax is good or bad, or if the rate is too high or too low. That's not the point at all.
I left my calculator at home anyway.
We are here because this event, MGF-37, is a perfect case study of how information moves through a society, or, maybe more importantly, how it doesn't move. It's about a specific phase shift in media. It's about the mechanics of silence.
So, okay, we're looking at a piece of information that was technically public, technically known, but was somehow closed off from most people for decades. And then one day, it just opened.
Precisely. The whole mission for this deep dive is to analyze when a closed explanation opened. We want to understand what keeps certain facts locked away in these specialized silos, and what happens when the cost of keeping that silo closed just becomes too high.
Okay, let's set the stage then. We need to get the what before we can get to the why. So what exactly was in this broadcast that has everyone so worked up?
The station ran a segment explaining the legal definition of the consumption tax. In Japan, the general public narrative, the story everyone tells, the one the media usually reinforces, is that the consumer pays the tax at the register.
Right.
And the shopkeeper is just a middleman who holds it for a bit before handing it to the government.
Which sounds pretty standard. That's how most of us think of sales tax. I pay the extra 10%, it goes to the state, it's my money just passing through the store.
Right, that's the narrative. But the broadcast explained that legally, under the actual statute in Japan, that is not what happens. The taxpayer defined by the law is the business, not the consumer.
Yeah, hold on.
The tax is legally just a component of the price the business charges. The consumer has zero tax liability, none.
Okay, so just to be 100% clear on this, legally, the shopper isn't paying a tax. They're just paying a price that the business decided to set.
Correct. The business is the one who pays the tax on the value they added. It's a subtle distinction, but it's a massive one in legal terms.
So for a lawyer or a tax accountant, is this shocking news?
Not even slightly.
Yeah.
It's written right there in the law. It's in every single tax textbook. You could have walked into a university law library 30 years ago and read this. It is not a scoop. It's not some conspiracy theory.
It's just how the machine is built.
Exactly. It's just the blueprint.
But for the average person watching the news while they're eating dinner.
It's a massive curveball.
Yeah.
It completely contradicts the story of their daily economic life.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the core mystery of MGF-37. If this has been a legal fact for decades, why was the media so silent about it for so long?
Right.
Why did they stick to the consumer pays narrative?
Instead of the business pays structure. And why did it finally come out now?
Exactly. That is the question.
I really want to dig into this idea of closed information because, when you hear closed, you think of classified documents or corporate secrets, maybe even active censorship from the government. But you're saying that's not what this was.
No, not at all. This is something much more subtle and honestly probably much more common. In this context, closed doesn't mean secret. It just means the circulation pathways were blocked.
Blocked how?
Well, think of society's information flow like a plumbing system. Some pipes are wide open, celebrity gossip, sports scores, the weather. That flows to everyone, no problem.
Sure.
But other pipes, specifically the ones that connect specialized knowledge to general knowledge, they're basically welded shut. The fact that businesses are the legal taxpayers, that was flowing freely in the specialized layer. If you read legal journals or academic papers, you knew.
But it was closed in the general broadcast layer, the
Yeah.
evening news, talk shows, the places where regular people just sort of passively absorb their idea of the world.
Correct. Absent from the passive observer layer.
Yeah.
And the sources make a really critical distinction here. This wasn't censorship. The government didn't send a memo saying, don't talk about this.
No men in black suits showed up.
None. This is more of an engineering problem. It was all about stability and cost.
Stability and cost. That sounds so clinical for a decision about what to tell the public. Break that down for us.
In the Japanese broadcast world, and this applies pretty much anywhere, the US, the UK, there are these implicit rules about creating friction. The sources talk about it in layers. Layer 1 is the pros and cons debate. You are always allowed to argue if a tax should be 5% or 10%.
Okay, yeah, that's standard political TV, people yelling at each other about rates. It's drama. Good for ratings.
Right. Then there's layer 2, discussing the effects. Will this hurt the economy? Will it fund Social Security? That's also allowed. But layer 3, discussing the fundamental legal structure of the thing, that was taboo.
Why? Why is explaining how the machine actually works so much more dangerous than arguing about if the machine is good or bad?
Because explaining the structure in this particular case, I mean, saying, hey, consumers aren't actually the taxpayers. It sounds too much like you're taking a political side. Well, imagine you're a news anchor. You go on air and say, actually, the law says businesses pay this, not you. It immediately sounds like you're arguing against the tax. It sounds like you're saying the government is tricking you, or the whole system is a lie.
Ah, I see. So just stating the dry legal fact feels like you're pushing an agenda.
Exactly. It feels like an attack on the status quo. And for a TV station, that creates friction. It invites angry phone calls from the government, from business lobbies, from confused viewers who feel like you're trying to gaslight them, and the whole system is optimized for low friction.
So it was cheaper socially and politically to go along with the simplified story.
The path of least resistance. The silence wasn't some grand conspiracy. It was just the safer option to maintain broadcast trust.
The sources have this really interesting metaphor for this, the Nios layering.
Yes. N-I-O-S.
Break that down.
N is the narrative. That's the story we live by.
Right.
We all chip in at the register to pay the tax. OS is the operating system. That's the legal reality. Business owners are liable for a tax on their value added.
And those two things are not the same.
Not at all. And normally, when your narrative and your OS don't match, you get what the sources call shear. Like tectonic plates rubbing together, it creates heat, it creates friction. And the media's job, as they saw it, was to avoid that friction by just ignoring the OS layer completely.
That makes perfect sense. It's like if you're at a baseball game, eating a hot dog, and the announcer suddenly starts explaining the operating system of the hot dog, which parts of which animal went into the grinder.
That's a surprisingly accurate analogy.
Everyone would stop eating. You'd disrupt the whole lunch. So the media just decided, let's not talk about the meat grinder. Let's just talk about how the hot dog tastes.
Exactly right. The cost of explaining the meat grinder was simply too high, so the explanation stayed closed until MGF-37.
Okay, so this equilibrium is in place. Everyone stays quiet because it's easier. But then the breach happens. Where did it happen? You said it wasn't a major network.
Right, and this is where the geography of media is so important. This didn't happen on a major Tokyo key station. It happened on a local station.
Why does that matter?
Think about the membrane of an organization. A major national station has a very, very thick membrane. They have these huge ties to sponsors, deep connections in government. They're under constant scrutiny.
They're an ocean liner. They can't turn on a dime.
They have too much to lose.
Yeah.
But a local station, they have a smaller impact, sure. But because they're smaller, they have more editorial discretion. Their membrane is thinner. They can let things through that the giants just can't.
The speedboat versus the ocean liner. So the local station found a gap. But how? How did they do it without triggering those political alarms we talked about?
This is the real genius of the MGF-37 event.
Yeah.
They used what the sources call a structure-only technique.
It's true.
The broadcast removed all stance, all critique, all evaluation.
So no, this is unfair to businesses or the government is lying.
Zero. None of that. They stripped away what the sources call the I layer, the intention or value layer. Usually news wraps facts and judgment, right? This is a bold move.
Okay.
This is bad for the economy. This broadcast didn't do that. They just used simple diagrams. Quizzes. True or false? The consumer is the taxpayer. Answer. False. Here is a diagram of how money moves.
They made it boring.
In a way, yes. They weaponized neutrality. By taking out all the judgment, they lowered the social cost of the explanation so much that it just slipped through the membrane. It didn't set off the political bias alarms. It wasn't an opinion. It was just, here's the blueprint of the engine.
That's actually brilliant. A structure-only transmission. I'm not telling you to be mad about the engine. I'm just showing you where the pistons are.
And that's what led it through a filter that had been in place for 30 years.
But I still have to ask, why now? If this has been true since the 90s, why did the cost of silence finally flip now?
The environment changed. The operating system of the real world started to grind against people's daily lives in a new way. The government introduced a new, really complex invoice system,
So the bureaucracy just got thicker.
much thicker. And suddenly, small business owners, freelancers, even regular people started to feel this life-level discomfort. The accounting was a nightmare. This simple narrative, it's just a tax you pay at the store, it stopped matching their lived experience.
The map didn't match the territory anymore.
Precisely. And at that point, the cost of silence, which breeds a lot of distrust when people realize things just don't add up, it finally became higher than the cost of explaining.
It became more expensive to ignore it than to just address it, the tipping point.
That's when the membrane ruptured.
Okay, so let's talk about the aftermath. The explanation is out there. The secret is out. I'm assuming people grab pitchforks. Revolution. Government collapses.
And that is the most fascinating part of this whole case study. No.
No,
Nothing. No explosion, no riots in the streets, no immediate change in the law.
really. That feels, well, it feels anticlimactic. We just spent all this time building up this huge seismic event.
But that's what defines MGF-37. It's what the sources call a low-amplitude, high-purity event. It was never about generating drama. It was about a quiet update to the software of society.
A software update, like a patch for your phone.
Exactly. Think of it as a cognitive update. This wasn't an action phase. It was a rereading phase.
Rereading.
Yeah. The people who saw this, especially freelancers and small business owners, they didn't necessarily feel rage. They felt this sort of validating discomfort. For years, they felt like something was off, but they didn't have the words for it. This broadcast gave them the syntax to understand their own reality.
It's like when you finally learn the name of a sound that's been annoying you for weeks. You don't necessarily fix it right away, but you suddenly perceive it differently. You stop thinking you're going crazy.
Precisely. You cannot unknow the structure once you've seen the diagram. The setup wizard for how people view this tax has been patched to version 1.1.
I love that. Patch to V 1.1.
Yeah.
So even when the news cycle moves on, the baseline has permanently shifted.
The sources use a great metaphor for this.
Yeah.
Mini fields.
Mini fields.
Imagine a field of vision. Usually the membrane between the system OS, how things actually work, and our daily cognition, how we think they work, is opaque. You can't see through it. MGF-37 made that membrane transparent for just a moment. You looked through and saw the gears turning.
And even after the curtain closes again, you know the gears are there.
It's irreversible. The naive story is dead. You can pretend to believe it, but you know it's just a story now. And that's why this matters. It's not about if the tax changes tomorrow. It's that the starting point for any future discussion has moved.
That's so interesting. Usually we measure the impact of a news story by, did it change a law or did someone get fired? But you're saying the impact here is just awareness.
Deep structural awareness.
Yeah.
It's way rarer than you think. Most news is just noise. It's layer 1 or layer 2, arguments and effects. Getting a layer 3 update, a structural update, is almost unheard of in mass media.
This brings us to the bigger picture then. We started this by saying we're not really talking about tax. We're talking about a diagnostic tool. MGF-37 isn't just a history lesson. It's a model for how the world works.
Right. If we treat this as a reference point, we have to ask the big question. If the consumption tax explanation was closed but is now opening, what else is currently closed?
Ooh, that's a good one. What other topics are sitting in that specialized knowledge box, fully understood by experts, but walled off from the public because they're too expensive to explain?
The sources list a few candidates, and they're all heavy hitters, places where the narrative and the operating system are completely out of sync.
Let's hear them.
First, the structural reality of pensions,
Oh, boy. That's a minefield.
and not the will I get paid debate, the actual legal structure of liability. Who actually owes what to whom? Is it a savings account or is it a tax transfer system? The legal reality is very specific, but the public narrative is, well, it's fuzzy. People think it's their personal bank account. The structure is quite different.
And if you explain that legal reality on the nightly news, strictly as a diagram, you might scare a lot of people or just confuse them.
Exactly. High friction, high cost. So we stick to the narrative. Another one is the structure of social insurance, or the relationship between energy prices and subsidies. We talk about the price of gas, but almost never the mechanism of how that price is actually built.
We treat the price like it's the weather, it just happens. But there's a machine behind it.
And foreign exchange, too. We hear the yen is weak or the dollar is strong, but we almost never get a neutral structural breakdown of why that mechanism moves that way without pointing a finger at a politician.
Because pointing fingers is easy. That's layer 1. Explaining the mechanism is layer 3, and that's boring until it's not.
These topics are all academically known. The answers are in the university library. But socially, they're silenced. Explaining them is just too risky for a producer who wants to keep their job and their sponsors happy.
So MGF-37 teaches us to watch for the cracks, to watch for those moments when the cost of silence finally becomes too high.
It invites us to look at media not just as a stream of news, but as a system of membranes. Some are thick, some are thin, and occasionally, under just the right pressure, they break.
And when they break, it's not always with a loud bang. Sometimes it's with a quiet, boring diagram on a local TV station that changes how you read the world forever.
That's the takeaway. The most profound shifts are not always the loudest. Sometimes the most revolutionary act is just reading the instruction manual out loud.
I really like that, reading the instruction manual out loud. So simple, but so disruptive.
It dismantles the assumption that we already know how things work, and that's the first step to actually understanding anything.
So here is our question to you, the listener. As you go about your week reading the news, scrolling your feed, just ask yourself, what feels closed?
Where do you feel that disconnect between the simple story everyone is repeating and the complex reality you might actually be experiencing?
What's the topic where everyone seems to be reading from the same script, but you have a sneaking suspicion there's a complex machine underneath that no one is talking about?
And under what conditions will that membrane break? Because MG-37 shows us that eventually, if the friction gets high enough, it will.
Something to mull over. We'll leave you with that thought. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
See you next time.